Welcome to the FEMCAST. My name is Anita White-Moran. We are more than just a podcast. We are a movement, fueled by the voices, ideas and stories of women from all walks of life. We're here to amplify your voice, empower your ideas and create change. This is a platform where your story matters. Whether it's celebrating success, overcoming adversity or raising awareness on issues that shape our world. Join us in this mission. Share your story, connect with us across our social media channels at the FEMCAST, and be part of a growing community striving for equality. This is the FEMCAST. Join us for a gripping episode of the FEMCAST as we welcome back Dr. Jen Fraser, the brilliant mind behind the Bullied Brain, to unravel the chilling realities of gaslighting and trauma. This episode dives into the shocking murders of 3 women in the UK, challenging the media's portrayal of the perpetrator as popular. Why do we normalise such horrors, and how can we prevent them? Jennifer and I dissect the sinister charm of those who hide behind a facade of charisma and respectability, revealing how these snakes in suit manipulate and gaslight their way through life. Discover the brain science behind empathy and manipulation, and why even experts can fall prey to these master deceivers. But it's not all doom and gloom. Jennifer introduces her upcoming book on gaslighting, offering proven strategies to safeguard our minds against it. Learn how we can shift from being trauma-informed to trauma-preventative, starting with education and workplace reforms. This episode is a call to action for a grassroots movement demanding change. It's time to dismantle outdated systems and build a society where brain health is prioritised. Don't miss this eye-opening conversation that promises to empower and enlighten. Tune in now and be part of the change. Hello, Jennifer. You're very welcome back to the new series of the FEMCAST. I am so thrilled to be working with you again. Jen actually did the whole first series on the Bullied Brain, taken from the book, The Bullied Brain. And we worked through everything from childhood bullying right up to femicide, sadly. But today, Jennifer is going to talk about the recent murders of 3 women in the UK. John Hunt, the BBC sports commentator, came home to find his 3 family members injured and later died of their injuries. Of course, it's shocked the country, the UK, especially because he's a well-known commentator with the BBC. But I was enraged with the language that was used, that we're talking again about a killer who is popular in the community. We don't care. We don't care how nice looking or how nice a guy he is or what he ate for breakfast that morning. We do not care. What we care about is headlines that are diminishing such a crime. So, Jennifer, if you'd like to take up from there, when you read about it or heard about it.
Yeah. So, Anita, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I love to speak with you. I love your project, the FEMCAST, and what you're doing. I think shining a spotlight on these issues and discussing them and hearing different angles is critical if we want actually to change as a culture and society. So, as you know, in 2022, my book came out, The Bullied Brain, and I was really looking at trauma. What does the trauma of all forms of abuse do to the brain? Whether it happens in the workplace, whether it happens because a random person kills your family. I mean, I don't know how anybody recovers from these kinds of things, whether it happens within the family unit or at school, etc. So I was looking at, what do the neuroscientists know about the impact of all forms of bullying? So it doesn't have to touch the body. It can be verbal. It can be psychological abuse. It can be neglect, emotional neglect, where you are a parent or a caregiver who doesn't show love or attention to the child. You can be a coach or a teacher who acts as if the child is not worth your attention. Or at work, a boss who interrupts you, humiliates you in public in front of your peers, etc. All of these acts, many of them are enabled in our culture, and they're normalized. The law does not hold them accountable. They do brain damage, plain and simple. As you know, the book is packed full of extensive research to help people understand that. So I feel like once we understand that, we can start to make really serious, effective, positive changes across the board. the fact that we're still going in circles around these massive issues in our society, it's kind of ridiculous. We really are at a tipping point, a place where we can make change. And that's why you and me talking about it together is very empowering and exciting for everybody. So my new book that's coming out, and the reason I'm bringing it up in this moment is because I want to show my shift in focus and why it's relevant to your question around the crossbow death of the three women, the young women, the daughters, and then the wife, and how just horrendous it was, and then how journalists covered the issue. Yeah. So my new book is looking at phenomenon like that in our society. It's called Shattered Brains. And it's really looking at gaslighting. So it's that the subtitle to the book is, and it's very much about prevention. And that's what I want to talk about today. I don't want to talk about what does trauma do to the brain. We have so much information on that, and we still haven't made the change. I want to say to everybody listening, why do we keep allowing trauma to happen? Why do we not build into our schools, our training of parents, our training of marriage partners, our workplaces, our sports, our arts? Why are we not preventing trauma from happening is my big question today that I want to unpack with you, Anita, and talk about.
Why are we not demanding it? It's demanding this change. Why are we sitting on our hands waiting for it to happen?
Exactly. And that's exactly true. It's like we want the law, or we want the government. We want some huge parental figure to step in and do something about this, when in actual fact,
it just needs the ordinary person and the grassroots.
It's got to be a grassroots movement, because government would appear to be very overwhelmed in the 21st century. Too many things to do. But the subtitle of the book is Gaslighting, How Gaslighting Impacts Our Minds. And here's the key part about prevention. Proven ways, and this is where the science comes in, proven ways to remain safe and sane. Because as soon as we start to participate in this normalizing of culture, it's normal to kill your wife. It's normal to take a crossbow and just randomly kill people, and then have people talk about it as if it's, this sort of upsetting situation, but he was a nice guy. I mean, all popular. Of these normalizing features, popular.
Oh my God. I was the cringe of just reading that word, popular. You say that about a child in school who's popular amongst his teammates because he shares the ball when they're playing football, or she makes sure everybody is okay, and she makes sure nobody's excluded, or he makes sure no one's excluded. Very popular. But like, to call a killer, a cold-blooded killer, popular, where their dad is going to pick that paper up, their extended family are going to pick that up online on the papers. They must be shattered. Talk about shattered brains, but shattered people, broken people already at the news. And now to read, I don't think these headlines serve any purpose. I don't think they're getting their message across. If the message that we're led to believe is like, we want to show that they're everyday people, they walk amongst us. We know this already. But for those families reading that, it's just careless.
Well, it really struck a chord with me when I read that. And then when I saw you speaking about the offensiveness of it, and that's why I reached out to you and said, oh, we have to talk, because it really struck a chord for me. Because in my work, one of the most interesting things that happens is, and you already just described it, we do not train, and it should start in childhood. We do not train people to understand that there are those amongst us who are what the experts refer to as snakes in suits. They are the most dangerous people out there, but they come across as absolutely popular. They're charismatic, they're intelligent, they're ambitious, they're funny, they're the life of the party, they're the pillar of the community. And we do not train children or ourselves to be vigilant. And this is we are constantly going down the garden path of thinking that if somebody is going to kill you with a crossbow, or going to walk home into your own home after marriage vows and romance and promises and having children with you, and they're going to beat you up, we want them to look like a monster. We don't want them to be popular. We want them to be oozing all of these kinds of caricatures that we see in the media of the bad person, the enemy. I mean, it's amazing how much even politics will try and paint that enemy and promise that they're going to keep us safe. They're going to put up fences. They're going to stop, migrants. They're going to block boats of desperate people coming from other countries. They're going to keep us safe. The police will keep us safe. It's all not true. The most dangerous person in our lives is popular. And if we can't wrap our mind around how dangerous that person is and how they are able to circumvent society's supposed protections, we are always going to be in danger. And it's really devastating to our brains in particular, because our brains badly want things to be clear and straightforward and identifiable. And if you can't identify who is the manipulator, the narcissist, the Machiavellian, and the psychopath in your community, you're in danger and your family's in danger. And this is what the gaslighting book is about, because these people are masters of manipulation. Even the experts struggle to stay strong, even though they're face-to-face a psychiatrist with someone that they know is a psychopath. Cut to half an hour, they start to believe that the psychopath's reality is real and their own perceptions are in doubt. That's how strong the manipulation is.
That's clever. That's really smart on their behalf.
Well, I mean, I think the key word you're using right there is smart.
Yeah.
That's the dangerous thing about
Devious.
them. They are devious. They're smart. They are pathological liars. They have no relationship to the truth like a regular human being does. The healthy brain has a relationship with the truth and strives, makes mistakes, tells a white lie, feels horrible about it, really tells a falsehood, and can't sleep that night. That is not the psychopath, narcissist, Machiavellian, what they refer to in the literature as the dark triad or the dark tetrad, depending. Now, I'm sure I wrote an article about this for Psychology Today because I was trying, and I used that word popular, Anita. I used it to try and help people understand the difference in a healthy brain and a brain of someone who's bullying, and it even is showing up in childhood. Now, when we see the child bullying in childhood, that's red flags for mental illness. That's red flags for a brain that is on a very serious and dangerous trajectory. That is not how we treat it. We punish that child as if they are badly behaved. That is an outdated moral system that's not going to save that kid, and it's not going to save the kid's victims, and it's not going to save the victims when they become an adult, because that is the person on the trajectory. And let's just use this literary motif because it really helps people understand. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. That's what we're talking about. And that's what the journalists uncovered in the newspaper. And I think to give them their due, I mean, you're a journalist, you report in on this more than me because you know more than I do. But my sense was their job, when they're doing a good job, is to present the facts. They're not allowed to have an opinion. They're not allowed to say he's a monster. They have to say, this is what people say. Here are the quotes. Because really, you should walk away from that article going, why is it that people that, let's say, bully in childhood all the way up to femicide, why is it that those people are so popular? How come they're the head of the church? How come they're the run the business? They're the CEO. How come they're beloved by their friend group and their family? And yet behind closed doors, they become this violent, destructive, aggressive person that you can't match with the respected pillar of the community, Dr. Jekyll. And the answer lies in the brain. And that's what I wrote about for Psychology Today. And I called it, Why Are Bullies So Popular? And then I unpacked the brain science.
Mm-hmm.
And the brain science, it's scary. Basically, so let's say we put the BBC presenter, his wife and daughters, and you and me into brain scans. Okay. So we had 5 fMRI brain scans operating, and they were looking at our brains, and they showed us images. They showed us really horrifying images of domestic violence, of children sobbing, of wives or husbands being hurt, of humiliation, of verbal abuse and threats. And we saw those images. All 5 of us, our brains would light up. They would light up in the empathy part of our brains, the neural networks for empathy, because we would relate to the suffering. We might even relate to the aggressor. We would just feel that this is the most horrendous thing we'd ever seen. We'd want to stop it. That's what empathy is for. It's innate. We're born with it. It's how we survive. An infant and a toddler and an 8-year-old, they're going to survive when they can understand what the powerful adults are thinking, what they're feeling, and what they're intending. If they can't read minds like that, they don't have a chance at survival. They need to know. They need to know the people in power. So this carries right through to our lives. The more empathic you are, the greater a leader you often are. It's a really important skill. And when you look at job ads, they'll say we're looking for people with empathy. So empathy is your ability to understand what someone else is feeling. And on a brain scan, you literally, if you see someone and their hand is being pricked and it's bleeding, you feel the same neural networks light up in your brain for pain. Your pain neural networks will light right up. You will feel what they're feeling, literally on a brain level. Now, what's interesting is it's muted. And it's muted because we are designed by evolution to go help that person. If I saw you getting your hand smashed by a hammer, I would feel the pain so badly that I would drop everything and I would go to help you. But the pain wouldn't be as debilitating as yours, or I couldn't actually help you. I'd be in too much pain. That's how brilliantly our brains are designed. Now, here's the frightening part. While the 5 of us in the fMRI machine, our brains are lighting up with these horrible images. They're lighting up emotionally. Our emotional neural networks are lighting right up. And so is our empathy. If we put a psychopath, a narcissist, a Machiavellian, a sociopath into the brain scanner, and we showed them the same images, exactly the same images, you would not see their empathy light up. You would not see their emotions light up. It would be extinguished. It's not getting activated at all in their brains. What lights up? Cognition, your deviousness, your manipulative ability, your brilliant mind, you can rationalize anything. You can justify anything, any amount of cruelty, any amount of ambition. It doesn't matter. You have cognitive power. So your cognition lights up and language lights up. What is it that makes you able to manipulate the law, manipulate the police, manipulate the government, manipulate your coworkers, your family, you name it? Your ability to use language. And that's plain and simple what the experts know about what's going on in the brains of the popular people amongst us who will do something as horrifying as pull out a crossbow, broad daylight, and kill someone else randomly.
It's like, I will never be able to understand how they woke up that day, got out of bed, whatever, did their routine breakfast, brushed their teeth, and just armed themselves with a crossbow, went across town and did that. And those women were tied up, and yeah, to leave them there dying as well and walk away. There was camera footage, the doorbell cameras of him just strolling away.
Again, and it's something that I write about in the Bullied Brain, because I was asking those same questions and I could not understand. And the reason I couldn't was because I worked with people. I have lived experience of people who are popular, who are leaders, who are trusted, they're empowered, they are charismatic, they have prestige and credibility in their positions. Those were the people I was working with. And they were manipulating a situation so that children that had been abused, some physically and emotionally, and one sexually, all of it was covered up. They knew it was happening and they covered up when it was happening. And so then as soon as it became public and they were negligent, they doubled down on covering up. And they did so many things to manipulate the situation that I became staggered by that same question that you just asked. And
The entitlement.
What I found in the literature is really where we can start this whole new cycle of prevention. Because really what we're describing is a cycle. You do not become, Anita, you can't relate to the guy with the crossbow because your brain's not damaged. I can guarantee you that if we put that guy into a brain scanner, we would see extreme damage. We would see what the experts call borderline personality disorder. Borderline personality disorder most often, I was going to say almost always, but you never really want to say those things in science. There can be a genetic component, but mostly there isn't. Mostly it is environment. So someone who has split in half so that they have this persona, they're Dr. Jekyll, respected, credibility, trusted, let's call him Dr. Larry Nassar. For 30 years, Dr. Larry Nassar sexually abused children under the auspices of being this important doctor for the Olympics. And all the adults, from the mothers in the room while he sexually abused their daughters, believing so much in his prestige, his popularity, his credibility, his knowledge. They were there when he sexually abused their daughters, but they believed him because of his powerful position. He was an authority, and we're trained very early in our schooling years, starting at 4 and 5 years old. We're trained to obey authority, and our brains get scripted that way. And there's nothing, it's so hard to change. We can change, but it's really hard work. So what we need is an upstream approach to this, whereby we are training kids from a very early age on, all through the school system, and especially in the workplace as well, to understand that some people might be suffering from borderline personality disorder, and we don't want to marry them, and we don't want them to be our bosses. And we don't want, once we start to see them manifest bullying behaviors where they have no emotional concerns about really harming somebody, and in fact, you can see them getting grandiose and powerful with every time they hurt someone, these red flags should be acted on immediately. But, as you know personally, our system is designed so that we have been trained to obey and believe. And we are perfect victims for these individuals because our society does not teach us skepticism. It doesn't teach us to ask pointed questions. It fills our kids with rom-coms and makes girls get all excited about their white wedding dress and what flowers they're going to have and the meal that they're going to serve at their romantic wedding. How many girls and how many young boys are trained to understand domestic abuse, how it happens, what it does, how to protect themselves, and how to identify whether they're going down the path of aggression or they're going down the path of victimhood, to halt it in its tracks and activate healing and rehabilitation before they have kids.
Yeah. And we do need those lessons, and we do need them as early as possible. Like, they're only teaching consent in TY, and TY you're 15, 16. It's too late. Maybe, with the accessibility now to porn, children are seeing more and more of that, and they don't know. Their brains aren't designed and developed enough to understand this isn't real. So expectations on boys and girls is just way out there. They don't understand it. They're being harmed every day.
There's two things I want to say to that. First of all, if I was teaching and I was in school, at about 12 or 13, you start teaching kids that pornography was used by the Nazis to desensitize their Nazi followers, the people that needed to do the killing and obey the orders to take completely innocent people, target them, call them the enemy, and then destroy them, including children. They needed to have completely desensitized brains. Their brains had to just be obeying orders. And that's what they said in the Nuremberg trials. They said, I was just following orders. And this is why when I talk about how serious it is that we allow brains to get scripted this way in our school system, this would be the most nth degree of what happens. Pornography was specifically used to completely destroy any sense of love or connection or relationship or intimacy or romance between male and female. They needed desensitized robot-like people. Now, so when you say that about social media, everybody listening to this needs to know, I have the American statistics. We should all look them up in our countries. In America, since the internet became this dominant force in 2000, from 2000 to 2018, youth suicide, that's our children, our 10-year-olds to 24-year-olds, youth suicide increased 57%. Now, if that is not enough of a red flag for us to say, maybe we need to change our school system, maybe we need to train kids to understand what abuse is, what it looks like, what to do, how to get help, how to have amazing upstream help so that we can rehabilitate brains before they go down this incredibly awful path towards violence and even intimate partner violence and domestic violence in front of children. Like, that should never be happening. And, if we want to have a culture where we really care about sports and we want to have a culture where we just love alcohol and it's condoned and normalized and enabled, great, have it, do what you want. But that's not the night that you send alcohol fueled people home to sleeping children and their partner. That's just stupid. It's ignorant. If you want to have the alcohol in the sport event, have a housing place where they go and they can fight each other all night long for all I care, but they shouldn't be going home. It doesn't make sense. So, we want to have our cake and eat it too in this silly society we're in right now. We have enough knowledge. We have enough brain science, 20 years of extensive brain science that tells us we can change. Our brains are absolutely wired for repair and recovery. They're absolutely wired to change. We have neuroplasticity until our last moment on the planet, but we need a big collective. Okay, just a second. A lot of people are getting hurt. It's ruining a lot of lives. The domestic abuser does not want to be that person. And they almost always come from abuse. That's not a natural way to behave. That's why you can't wrap your mind around it. You can't imagine going home and beating someone up. It doesn't make sense to you. It's a kind of trauma, though.
Yeah, I understand that. And I do. We've said it in the first series, the Bullied Brain series, like it all goes back to education. But they're equipped with all this information. They have all the science. Everything is backed up. Like they don't go in and perform surgeries without knowing what the outcome is going to be. They already can foresee this outcome.
Exactly.
You wouldn't send a medic in and go, right, go have a go with that and we'll see what happens the other side of it. Whereas if we're not educating the children now, if we're not bringing them in after they've suffered trauma and gotten them the services that they need, equipping the moms and the dads and the children. Like John Hunt is left and he has a surviving daughter. Can you imagine just the pain they're in right now and the trauma that they're going to carry forever?
No, I can't. I honestly can't.
Well, no, I can't imagine it either. But one surviving daughter left, missing her two sisters and her mom. And again, if that young man was traumatized, bullied, whatever, and it was spotted early, we don't teach our sons and daughters the skepticism that you talk about, that they need. They don't have these life skills, and they certainly don't have them now with their heads stuck in phone. Like the social skills are gone way down. You see the 50% increase in suicides.
57%.
Yeah, that's horrendous.
Exactly. But I mean, it's not on the front page of the newspaper as far as I can see. It's not being addressed at high government levels as far as I can see. There's all this talk about mental health. They shouldn't even be using that term. That's an outdated term. We're talking about brain health. And one of the initiatives that I want to see happen is you create in a school a brain safe room. You create in a workplace the brain safe room.
Yeah.
And when people start to bully, if a child is bullying you at school, you go to the brain safe room because you know that it's harming your brain. And it actually is harming the brain of the bystanders. And it's harming the brain of the child that's doing the bullying. Same thing in the workplace. So the individual in the workplace who is doing all the classic bullying things, they're sexually harassing, they are humiliating, they're belittling, they're intimidating, they're threatening, they're losing their temper in extreme sort of psychotic ways. They're using language as a weapon. They're blocking you from opportunities. They're taking your work and calling it their own. They don't invite you to certain meetings. I mean, I could go on and on and on. We all know these bullying behaviors. They're textbook. We know bullying behaviors in childhood. We know bullying behaviors in adulthood, in the workplace. And they're textbook. But we just keep doing the same things. Now, imagine what it would be like if I went to the workplace or I went to school and I felt an impulse not to read books, not to find my friends, not to do my work, not to get really excited about the marketing that we're doing or the team or the collaboration or make that phone call, try and make that sale. No, I'm not interested in any of that. I'm looking for a target. I am so psychologically unhinged. I'm so brain traumatized that I need a target to feel better. Soon as I identify that that's my feeling, you can train children to understand this. We could train people in the workplace. Second, you feel that feeling, you go to the brain safe room and you rehabilitate. You have to change your system. You have to pull yourself out of fight. Basically, that's the mode that you're in. You're in fight mode. Your sympathetic nervous system is activated. Who knows why? Something could have happened. Maybe it's a traumatic memory, whatever. You've got an activated system.
Do you think the bully is aware that that's starting to activate in his brain when he or she is approaching the person that they're the target as such? Do you think they know this is happening or not?
You know how we know that they know it's happening? Because they cover it up. You don't cover something up if you think that it's okay behavior. So, that was one of the big questions I had, because it was so shocking to me that my colleagues that I was working with were abusing kids. I couldn't believe it. I was like, I see them all the time. I see them every day. I've never seen them screaming and yelling and swearing and using homophobic slurs and causing kids to cry. Like, what? This isn't possible. This is Mr. Hyde. And all I've ever seen is Dr. Jekyll. How is it possible? And then I realized, oh, they do that behind closed doors. That's domestic abuse. You're the popular person at work and in the community, but when you close that door to your home, you become Mr. Hyde. It's the Catholic priest. You are the pillar of the community. But once you feel that impulse to abuse a child, you're doing it behind closed doors. And you know what? Public-private are one of the best ways for us to start to unpack this in society. We train kids from the very beginning. We can start in the workplace too. If you can't do what you want to do in public, if you can't comment to the journalist in public about what you did and why and how it went down, then don't do it. If you have an impulse to keep what you're doing private, you know you're in trouble. It's not okay. It's unhealthy. You would not belong to society. You would feel shame in society if they saw what you're doing. So go get help. Diagnose, get help. It's a brain problem. You're not a monster. You're not a bad person. You need help.
So Jennifer, tell us about shattered brains.
So what I'm trying to do with the book is create the prevention program that you and I are talking about right now. This whole idea that instead of just going about our business in the same old way, where we report on these preventable tragedies like suicide, domestic violence, random violent killing, like happened to the BBC presenter. These things should never be happening. And we should be much more aware that they are going to happen. But that requires a really big reset, because we have, just as we've been talking about, our brains have been wired and scripted to behave and think in certain ways. It's really hard work for the brain to disobey, to unlearn, to unwire scripted neural networks. It requires a lot of work. And so that's really the point that we're at right now. We've got to invest in the work, break the cycle, start to get brain informed. And I think identifying gaslighting and what it does, how much it damages our brains, is a really good starting place. And so I'm looking at the workplace specifically, because the bottom line is we need our sort of powerful adults, our professional adults, our working adults to care about this issue. Once they care about the issue, we'll start to see changes in education and start to see changes in how we raise and protect and care for our children. But we need to start with the workplace. So basically gaslighting, just to make it really clear for people, because I'm finding in my research that people they misunderstand it. And I mean, maybe we use the word in different ways, but I'll just explain how I'm using the word very specifically. I'm using the definition that was in the Merriam-Webster dictionary and in other dictionaries too, but it was interesting. In 2022, gaslighting was the word of the year. And that's because it was looked up 1,700 and something more times than it had been in the past. More times, 1,700. So it had become this incredibly compelling word for people. They were trying to understand and know, what is gaslighting? How does it work? And how does it affect me? How does it affect my world, my populace, my community, politics, everything? So gaslighting, the key aspect of it is you manipulate someone else to doubt their own perceptions of reality because you have an agenda. So for example, you'll see this in medical gaslighting, #medical gaslighting. And it's a very absolutely fair concern of women that they are misled to think that their symptoms are just stress, or their symptoms are menopause, or their symptoms are, indigestion, when in actual fact, they're having a heart attack.
Mm-hmm.
And this is because as you know, there's little research done on female bodies and how we respond. A lot of the research, the majority of the research is done on males, and it's different. We have different systems. And so we manifest medically differently. So women are putting this out, calling it #medical gaslighting. In my way of defining the word, that's not what I mean, because that would imply or argue that doctors or medical professionals have an agenda, and their agenda is to hurt women. I don't believe that's true. I think medical doctors have been trained in a particular mindset, highly trained, so trained that they're not really expected to think independently. They're expected to apply what they know. That's how they save lives. So it's not like they go to work in the morning and say, I'm going to hurt a bunch of women because I don't like women. I'm a misogynist. They don't. They go to work and say, I've been taught to think in these ways. That's what I know. I did it for 11 years, and I'm now going to apply that to the case that's being put in front of me. And I'm going to make mistakes because I haven't been taught properly, not because I don't care about my patient. So that's not what I mean when I say gaslighting. When I'm using the word gaslighting, I'm talking about somebody who has an agenda. So if you go into the workplace and you come up against an abusive individual, that individual, just as you asked that question before, which is a really, really good one, do they know what they're doing? Well, they do, because they're so highly adept at ensuring that when they're in front of their bosses, for example, they are charming. They actually make a really good effort to groom their bosses. They groom their bosses just like a pedophile will groom the family. They groom the victim, but they also groom the parents. And they also groom the teachers and the coaches and the administrators at the school or the sport program, because that's how they are going to get access to the child. It is very, very carefully done, and they're very patient. They will do their abuse in the most subtle ways. I mean, it's the love bombing of the domestic abuser, the psychopath who marries somebody and then destroys them, right?
Mm-hmm.
They have the honeymoon phase. They groom the person.
They have that in the workplace as well. Yeah.
They absolutely have that in the workplace, and they also have it in child abuse. If you want to emotionally abuse a child, you start out by gaining their trust. You make them think you care about them, that they're special. You give them opportunities and gifts. It's textbook. The fact is, though, we don't teach anybody from childhood all the way up into the workplace. We don't have regular weekly seminars where we all sit down together and go, okay, let's make sure we're all on the same page. What does grooming look like? What does gaslighting look like? How do we protect our brains from this pernicious kind of behavior that's highly manipulative? And our brains are very vulnerable to it. Even experts are vulnerable to the machinations of a psychopath. And so what about the rest of us regular people that don't have psychiatric degrees? How are we going to protect ourselves? If that's not a regular conversation happening in the workplace led by HR, we are going to continue to see workplaces where abuse is flourishing.
Yeah, exactly. Because if they're able to manipulate a brain that works on brains, understands brains, and knows what happens, others' brains, it's just so devious the way they work.
It's devious. And again, let's just come full circle to say, and I'm not trying to say they shouldn't be held accountable, because if you don't hold people like this accountable and make them responsible for the fact that their brain is harming other people's brains, then we get nowhere. I mean, basically, you have to think about it as if I went into work with COVID and I knew I had COVID. I'd taken a test and I tested positive, and I went into the workplace and infected a bunch of people and some of them died. I would be held accountable. That is an irresponsible act on my part. I should feel exactly the same way if I have an impulse to manipulate, to lie, to ruin someone else's career, to use a smear campaign, to verbally put them down, to humiliate them. Sorry, those are viruses and they do extreme damage. They've got to be stopped, and I need to be held accountable. And once I am held accountable, the beautiful thing is I can get better. I have that choice. I can rehabilitate. It's like having an addiction. I can get better from that behavior because my brain has neuroplasticity. That's the new model. It's medically informed. It's not morally, oh, you're a monster, because that doesn't get us in. It's not working.
Yeah. Do you think if they've gotten too far down the road and, I think addiction is a good way of using the parallels for it. They've gone so far, they go, well, I've gone this far now, I may as well just keep going. So they continue the behavior over and over again rather than go, you know what, tomorrow if I quit, I could be a better person. I could
Yeah,
actually do the things I
yeah,
need to do or want to do.
it's the perfect parallel. And the way you just articulated that is exactly the mindset, right? But what we have to look at, which is more painful, is our society. When we talk about Harvey Weinstein, when we talk about Larry Nassar, we talk about any of those, Bill Cosby, any of these people that are highly abusive, and they're highly abusive for 30 years or 40 years. Every single time we read about these people, we read about them many, many, many times. It was identified. It was reported by victims. It even went to the FBI in Larry Nassar's case, and they did not stop it. They did not act. They did not understand what they were dealing with. They did not protect victims. They let the system go on and on and on. If a brain is abusive and enabled by its society, which is what we do for many of these people for 30 years, it's going to be almost impossible to fix it. But if you caught Harvey Weinstein or Larry Nassar, these high profile abusers, if you caught them the first time they did it at 16 or 17, and you put them into an intensive rehabilitation program, and then they were heavily monitored because we know how dangerous and infectious and can ruin people's lives and health. If we did that as a society, a very upstream intervention right away, then we might not be having the same outcomes that we do now, where we have a society full of abuse.
Mm. Do you think we need to dismantle absolutely everything across the board? Education, judicial system, nobody's trauma informed, so they don't understand when somebody speaks out and says, this happened to me. Just the whole dismantling of everything and starting from scratch.
I think that probably because I'm an educator myself, but I'm a big believer in education. And I think that people are really smart and dedicated. And our kids are unbelievably smart and dedicated and motivated if we catch them at the right time and we don't ruin them. Yeah. And so like I was saying before, I think that I want to shift the model. I think it's great to be trauma informed, but I think we're at a place where we've got to become trauma responsive and trauma preventative.
Proactive.
Proactive.
Yeah.
That's the perfect word. That we need to prevent. We need to be proactively preventing trauma in the first place. Why do we think it's normal to traumatize so many people? It doesn't make sense. It's and what's happened, Anita, that's the most interesting. And I write about this in the Bullied Brain, and it helps people understand. We have a myth in our society that abuse and bullying are a necessary evil for greatness. And this myth is destroying us because it is a myth. There's no research that backs it up. I can give you the most enormous amount of research that tells you that all forms of bullying and abuse,
how bad it is,
are they're not going to bring high performance. They're going to create a lot of ill health. It's like they're not going to give you your best athlete, your best manager at work, your best employee. You're going to lose talent. You're going to have retention issues. You're going to have people that don't come to work because they're in fight, flight, and freeze. You're not going to get any greatness out of it. But you can keep believing that myth as long as you like, but it's not serving our society anymore. It's got to be debunked by science.
Yeah. And I think the language that we use around it as well. And just going back to teaching children early on, skepticism keeps coming up in my head as we were having this conversation. And it's really getting them how to read people and listen to the language, especially listen. Because you have abusers who totally groom children and adults.
Yes.
So you listen to language and say, if you have somebody starting a sentence with a 1,000,000,000%, 1,000,000%, this is true, that's the language of a liar.
Yep. I mean, it's really interesting, that idea of teaching people to listen on a number of different levels. Yeah. Basically so in my new book, in the Gaslighting book, that's exactly what I try to do. I'm trying to use the neuroscience to say, just a second, do you even know how your brain constructs your reality? If you don't know how your brain constructs reality every day, you don't know how to identify what's true and what's false. So let's start with what the neuroscientists know about how you make reality every day out of massive amounts of data coming into your brain. So the heart's job is to pump blood. The lungs' job is to breathe in and out, exhale, inhale. The brain's job is to make a coherent story out of massive amounts of data. Now, if you don't know what's real and what's false, what's a lie and what's a truth, you're going to be easily manipulated. So yes, let's start to teach people, number one, in the workplace, think of all the different exercises. And, the mistake we make, my final thing is though, that once we construct this ability to better understand what our brains are doing, and our brains are just miraculous, we want to always do these things as a seminar. We want it to be a workshop. We're going to do a workshop one weekend and it's going to last us for the full year. We're going to talk about policy and procedure and abuse and harassment and what's not permitted for 2 hours in a meeting. And then that's going to last us for the year. That's not how the brain learns. The brain learns by repetition at timed intervals. So if we want someone to learn a new computer system, we teach them every day for 6 months. If we want our workplaces to really get good at identifying harassment, recognizing sympathetic nervous activation and the impulse to hurt someone else, the impulse to run away, the impulse to freeze. If we want people to understand gaslighting, how it works, how to identify it, how to become very skeptical, how to have a really rich, nuanced emotional response, and then what to do when it happens. If we want these changes where our workplaces become really healthy, not just for our bodies, but healthy for our brains. And
especially our brains.
Especially our brains. Everybody talks psychological safety. Really what they're talking about is brain safety. And that is the new workplace. That's going to be the workplace that has a competitive advantage going forward. And I think it's really exciting. We can empower people to learn this material. It's not hard, but we have to put in the time. That's what our brains need.
And I really feel that's how workplaces will retain the talent. That if they're proactive in this. Thank you so much, Jennifer, for a brilliant and another insightful episode. And I look forward to you coming back because we are going to be talking about brain science in business, empowering each other. And it's going to be a great season. Thank you so much, Jennifer.
Thanks, Anita. I look forward to our next chat.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the FEMCAST. We hope Sam Beckinsale's story has shed light on the critical issues of coercive and controlling behaviour and financial abuse. If you or someone you know is experiencing domestic abuse, please reach out to local support services or log on to our website, thefemcast.com, for support services in your area. Don't forget to subscribe, rate and review our podcast to help us continue bringing these important conversations to the forefront. Join us next time for more inspiring stories and empowering discussions. Stay strong, stay informed, and stay connected. This is the FEMCAST.